I never thought a simple parking spot could unravel a person's sanity, but that was before I met Karen. In our quiet little suburban neighborhood, where freshly cut lawns and pristine driveways were supposed to signal peace and order, Karen was the storm no one asked for. She wasn't just part of the HOA, she was the HOA, clipboard permanently glued to her hand, eyes constantly scanning for the smallest infraction. A trash can out 10 minutes late? Violation. Grass half an inch too long? Violation. Welcome mat crooked? Another violation. But the thing that pushed me, and, I suspect, everyone else, toward madness wasn't the nitpicking. It was the parking. I'm Ethan, and I'd paid good money for my reserved parking spot right outside my townhouse. My little safe haven. Except it never stayed mine for long. Karen, in her towering white SUV, treated it like her personal throne. Day after day, she'd wedge that beast of a car into my space, her smug grin practically daring me to say something. The first time, I figured maybe she misread the numbers. The second time, I gently reminded her at the HOA meeting. She smiled sweetly and said, "I didn't realize your little car was so sensitive about its space." By the third time, I was hanging by a thread. And then came the day that broke me. 12 hours at work, running on fumes, dreaming of nothing but collapsing into bed. I turned onto my street, and there it was. Karen's SUV, parked right in my spot, bold as ever. I pulled up beside it, honked twice, and waited. Nothing. No lights from her house, no movement. Just silence and that infuriating car. I parked 2 blocks away and stomped to her door. When she finally answered, she didn't even pretend to care. "I had groceries and didn't want to carry them too far," she said with a shrug. "It's just one night." "It's not just one night." "You do this all the time," I said, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. She sneered. "Maybe if you spent less time complaining and more time following the HOA guidelines, you wouldn't have so many problems." Then she slammed the door in my face. The next morning, my car was gone. Towed. Karen had reported it as abandoned. And at that evening's emergency HOA meeting, she announced a necessary fee increase for community beautification, which just so happened to pay for brand new patio furniture and security cameras, all installed at her house. That smug smile on her face told me everything. This wasn't about rules. This was war. I sat on my porch that night, staring at the empty space where my car should have been, the weight of exhaustion and frustration pressing down on my chest. The streetlights flickered, and somewhere down the block, a dog barked, but all I could hear was Karen's smug voice echoing in my head. "It's just one night." No, this wasn't about one night anymore. This was about every violation, every fake smile, every power trip she'd taken at my expense. But I didn't know what to do until Tyler showed up with a six-pack and that dangerous glint in his eye. Tyler was the kind of friend who could turn frustration into action with just a few words. He listened while I vented, nodding along as I recounted every miserable run-in with Karen. Then he leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You could always teach her a lesson," he said. I scoffed. "What, like egg her car? I'm not about to get arrested for vandalism." "Not vandalism," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Borrowing." I laughed, the absurdity of it shaking loose some of the tension in my chest. But the seed was planted. After he left, I couldn't shake the thought. Not destroy her car. Just remind her that not everyone bowed to her imaginary crown. I paced my living room, the idea growing roots. I wasn't some pushover neighbor. She needed to know that. The opportunity came faster than I expected. The next night, I was walking past her house, and there it was, her SUV, parked in her driveway, keys likely hanging on that little hook inside her kitchen like they always were. Her garage window was open just a crack. My heart started pounding before I even made a decision. But I stood there, in the dark, staring at that window for 10 minutes, every part of me screaming not to do this. And then I thought about her laughing at the meeting, about my car towed, about paying extra HOA fees so she could sit on her new fancy patio set and sip wine while writing me up for nonsense. That was it. My legs moved before my brain could stop them. I slipped through the garage window, heart racing, barely breathing. Her house smelled like expensive candles and arrogance. I tiptoed to the kitchen, grabbed the keys, and froze, waiting for some cosmic force to stop me. Nothing came. I slid into her SUV, the leather seats cold and stiff beneath me. I turned the key, and the engine purred like it knew exactly what was about to happen. I pulled out of her driveway slowly, careful not to make a sound. At first, it was just a loop around the block. But then, like fate itself nudging me forward, I spotted the construction lot at the end of the street, freshly churned mud, glistening from the rain. My hands tightened on the wheel. Screw it. I pressed the gas. The SUV's tires spun wildly, spraying mud in every direction. I laughed, louder and louder, as the white paint disappeared under thick layers of sludge. Donuts, figure eights, pure chaos in that empty lot. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was winning. I wasn't Ethan, the guy who got pushed around. I was the guy who pushed back. But then blue and red lights flickered at the edge of the lot. My heart stopped. Someone had called the cops. I jerked the wheel hard, veering down a side street, tires slipping in the mud. I spotted an abandoned warehouse and pulled around back, hiding the SUV behind a dumpster. I wiped down the wheel, the handles, the console, every surface I could think of, and bolted on foot, adrenaline burning in my veins. The next morning, I woke up half expecting sirens at my door. Instead, I got something better. Karen's shrill voice echoed across the neighborhood as she stood in her driveway, staring at her once spotless SUV, now a monument to chaos. Neighbors peeked through curtains, some laughing, others whispering. And for the first time, Karen had no words. Just rage. I thought the mud-splattered SUV would finally humble Karen, that maybe, just maybe, she'd back down and let the neighborhood breathe. But I underestimated her capacity for spite. The very next day, I found a bright yellow violation notice taped to my front door. Recycling bin overfilled. I stared at it, jaw clenched, as if the piece of paper itself was mocking me. The bin had been barely full. She was sending a message, she wasn't finished. By the end of the week, my mailbox was flagged for being unapproved design. It had been the same mailbox for 3 years, but now suddenly it wasn't good enough. A few days later, my lawn was cited for excessive growth, even though I'd mowed it just the day before. Karen had gone from passive-aggressive to all-out warfare, and she was relentless. But I wasn't the only target. One morning, I found Mrs. Whitaker sitting on her porch, wiping tears from her eyes. Her old golden retriever lay at her feet, head resting on her shoe. I asked what happened, and she handed me a slip of paper, a formal HOA notice banning unleashed animals and excessive pet noise. It was clearly targeted at her therapy dog, and when she protested at the HOA meeting, Karen publicly accused the dog of aggression and threatened to call animal control. The neighborhood was seething, but Karen's grip was ironclad. People were scared. She thrived on that fear. But the worst was yet to come. Tyler stopped by one night with a look on his face that told me he'd found something big. He pulled out his phone and showed me footage from his security camera. It was shaky, nighttime footage of Karen's driveway, but clear enough to see Rick, her husband, climbing into the SUV the night it disappeared. He'd driven it out hours after I'd abandoned it, relocating it to make the mess look intentional and far worse than it was. My stomach twisted. She'd set me up. I couldn't sit on this. At the next emergency HOA meeting, I stood up before Karen could open her mouth. I played the footage from Tyler's phone for everyone to see. Gasps filled the room, murmurs spreading like wildfire. But I wasn't finished. I looked straight at Karen and said, "And if you think that's all, wait until you hear this." I pulled out a stack of printed reports, copies of fake crime reports Karen had submitted to the city, all anonymous but with handwriting that matched the violation notes taped to our doors. She'd fabricated a series of break-ins and suspicious activity just to push through stricter HOA surveillance rules, giving herself more authority and power to police the block. The room fell silent. Marilyn, the HOA president, shook her head slowly. "Karen, this is beyond unacceptable." Karen tried to argue, sputtering excuses about misunderstandings and taking safety seriously. But no one bought it. The meeting ended with a vote to strip her of her position. She stormed out without a word, but the fury in her eyes promised that this wasn't over. And it wasn't. The next weekend, we held a neighborhood barbecue. Spirits were high, people laughing and relaxing for the first time in ages. Then, like a villain in a bad movie, Karen showed up. She marched straight into the middle of the crowd, waving around papers and photos, loudly accusing me of harassment, theft, and property damage. But Tyler was ready. He plugged his phone into the speakers and played the video again. This time, everyone watched in absolute silence as Rick moved the SUV, and Karen's lies fell apart in front of her. Karen's face crumpled. She turned on her heel and stormed off, but the damage was done. The queen had been dethroned. For the first time in months, life in the neighborhood felt quiet. The weight of Karen's iron rule had been lifted, and people started to breathe again. I even caught Mrs. Whitaker smiling as she walked her golden retriever without fear of another violation notice. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. And I was right. One evening, just as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I found a thick envelope stuffed in my mailbox. The crisp white paper inside carried the intimidating logo of a law firm. My stomach twisted before I even read the first line. Karen was accusing me of theft, trespassing, vandalism, and emotional distress regarding her precious SUV. The letter demanded immediate payment of damages totaling over $5,000, or they would take me to court. I stormed inside, pacing the living room, my heart pounding with fury and panic. She couldn't leave it alone. She couldn't accept defeat. She wanted one last shot at crushing me. I called Tyler, barely able to get the words out without choking on rage. He listened patiently, then chuckled. "She's bluffing," he said confidently. "If she had proof, we wouldn't be talking about letters, you'd already be in court." He was probably right, but I needed more than reassurance. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer of my own. After reading through the letter, he confirmed what Tyler suspected: Karen's claim was flimsy at best. No evidence, no witnesses, just noise and threats. But he also warned me, people like her don't need to win, they just need to make it miserable for you until you fold. And sure enough, 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one was nastier, more threatening, demanding I settle out of court for $5,000 to avoid a lengthy and expensive legal process. It was extortion dressed up in legalese. I wasn't going to give her a dime. That night, I decided to fight fire with fire. I remembered something the mechanic at the local auto shop had let slip weeks ago over drinks at the bar. When they detailed Karen's SUV after the mud fiasco, they'd found a small, sealed envelope stuffed with cash hidden under one of the seats. Apparently, Rick had been using the SUV to stash money from some side business, one he conveniently hadn't told Karen about. When she found out, it led to a screaming match in their driveway loud enough to make the neighborhood kids cry. Karen had buried that embarrassment and turned it into a personal vendetta against me. But now, I had leverage. The next morning, I walked straight up to Karen's front door and knocked. She opened it with that smug smile that had haunted me for months. Did you come to apologize? She sneered. Not exactly, I said calmly. I just thought you should know, I'm aware of the envelope your husband left under the seat of your SUV. The blood drained from her face so fast I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The one full of cash, I continued. The one he never told you about. Funny how that didn't make it into your little lawsuit. Her eyes darted around nervously, her smugness evaporating. I've got no problem explaining all of this to the HOA. Or your lawyer. Or, maybe your husband's clients, I added. Her face twisted into something between rage and panic, but for once, she was speechless. Forget it, she spat. I'm dropping the claim. Glad to hear it, I said with a grin. And by the way, stay out of my yard. As I walked back to my house, I couldn't help but smile. Karen had tried every trick in the book. But this time, she lost the game on her own terms. The change was almost immediate. The suffocating tension that had hung over the neighborhood for so long finally lifted. People who once avoided eye contact now waved again, stopping to chat on the sidewalk instead of hurrying past. Mrs. Whitaker even baked me a loaf of banana bread, pressing it into my hands with a wink and a whisper that she was glad that tyrant finally got what she deserved. The HOA meetings, once a showcase for Karen's micromanagement, became productive, even friendly. With Marilyn in charge, discussions shifted to real community needs, fixing streetlights, planning a neighborhood cookout, and repairing the old playground. But Karen wasn't done without one final act of pettiness. 2 mornings after our confrontation, I woke up to find my trash cans knocked over and garbage strewn across my yard. At first, I considered storming over to her house and demanding she grow up, but then I noticed something else, a moving truck parked in her driveway. Her house sat eerily silent, and by sunset, Karen and Rick were gone. Word spread fast. Some said it was the embarrassment, others whispered about Rick's questionable dealings catching up to them, but everyone agreed on one thing: the neighborhood felt better without her. The couple that moved into Karen's old house brought light and warmth the block hadn't felt in years. Their kids played in the yard, laughter echoing down the street, and for the first time since I moved in, coming home felt like coming home. One evening, Tyler and I sat on my porch with beers in hand, watching the sun dip low. He pointed to Karen's old parking spot, now permanently empty, and smirked. Funny, all that chaos over a stupid parking spot, he said. I laughed and nodded. Yeah, but I'll tell you what, if that spot ever gets taken again, I'm not stealing anyone's car this time. Tyler raised his beer. Smart move. Maybe just leave a pile of mud in their driveway instead. We laughed, clinking bottles, knowing the storm had passed. But deep down, I knew if someone like Karen ever tried to take control again, I'd be ready, and this time, I wouldn't need games or schemes. Just one simple reminder: stay in your own damn parking spot. Have you ever felt powerless against HOA rules or a Karen in your life? Share your experiences below. Let's see who had it worse.